Good afternoon. Last session of the day, and we're going to finish strong today, looking forward, the future of your business. So today we're talking about marketing to millennials and beyond, and we have our millennial representative and our beyond representative today. So I'm Mary Gilbert, and I'm from eBay, and I'm pleased to introduce Brigitte Brady Harris, Vice President of Brand Marketing from Williams-Sonoma, and Patti Girardi, Vice President of Marketing at the Compass Group. And before we get started diving into our topic, I'd like to let each of them introduce themselves a little bit more and tell you a little bit more about their background and what they do so you have some context of where they're talking from. So let's start with Brigitte.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. I hope you have had a great conference. My name is Brigitte Brady Harris. I head up brand marketing actually for the Pottery Barn brand. So Pottery Barn Teen, Pottery Barn Kids, PB Dorm, a lot of different brands within our portfolio. And we're part of the Williams-Sonoma Inc. family of brands, which of course include Williams-Sonoma, West Elm, and a couple of smaller brands, Rejuvenation and Mark and Graham.
And in my role, I actually head up marketing and creative services for Chartwell's Higher Education, which is a division of Compass Group, the largest food service provider in the world, which operates in a variety of markets. In the higher education space, it's very interesting right now because we are half into Generation Y and half into Generation Z. So if you think about the groups kind of breaking off and Gen Z being 5 to 20 and millennials being 20 to 35. I've got juniors and seniors, millennials, and I've got freshmen and sophomore Gen Zers. So that's kind of the lens that I bring to the table today. By food service, just so we're really clear in terms of the discussion, we're talking about operating resident dining halls on about 270 colleges and universities nationwide, as well as food court and catering operations.
So we're going to start talking about millennials first, and then Patti brings in an interesting perspective on the Gen Z. But I want to start with Brigitte, and I want to ask the first question on our list, but I want to ask it in a slightly different way. So we know our audience is changing, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us what you know and what you're seeing that's influencing the way that these new this new audience is interacting with your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So we think about it in a lot of different ways because our brands really span a lot of different life stages. So we actually worked with and helped, really we're a part of the lives of millennial teens with our PB Teen brand. It started about 10 years ago, so really got to know this generation then. And then we are currently very heavily interested in what our millennial moms are thinking about. So 83% of first-time moms are millennial. And so we're thinking very heavily about that in Pottery Barn Kids. And then for Pottery Barn, really, our evolving new home buyers and folks that are moving and making life changes and getting married. So we think about it in life stages. The biggest thing that I think about is that the size of the generations. And so if you add up Gen Z, the sort of 5 to 20, and you add up Gen Y or millennials, it's over 50% of the US population. And so it's a very big group of people to think about, and that's why it is such a hot topic in marketing and hot topic for business, and rightly so. So we're just really focused on the
And
size.
talk a little bit about the characteristics. What's shaping this generation? Because they're obviously really different. There's lots of commentary out there, but I think that the people that are really studying them from a brand perspective probably are in a much better position to talk about who they are and what their interests are, what's driving them.
Sure. I think one of the things we think about is people and the segmentation within the generation and the nuances within that. But generalizing, I'd say that the biggest aspect, of course, is the technology piece. Right? That's really what is defining such a dramatic difference between silent generation, boomer, Gen X, and then the other 50% of the people that grew up in the digital age. And so we think a lot about how technology plays a role in the shopping experience and making that experience just as seamless as so many of the things that the millennial generation has grown up with. So the technology piece, I'd say, is a key characteristic. I would say that there is something to the optimism that you often hear related to the millennial generation. I would say that there is definitely something to it. I'd love actually for anyone in this group to validate or not validate that. But for example, you look at the kind of small data opportunities. So you can, search on Spotify and you'll look at the moods, and it's interesting to see how many of the genres, how many of the moods are all very optimistic moods for the song choices. But within our Pottery Barn brands, we find that, for example, sentiment art is what we call it. So really empowering phrases that we'll put on pillows or wall art and things like that does very well, and it did very well in our PB Teen brand and is trending out of PB Teen and starting to do very well in our Pottery Barn Kids brand and in Pottery Barn.
So let's contrast that for a minute, because there is a contrast in the Gen Z space. So can you talk a little bit about that, Patti?
Absolutely. And really just to segue, and I just really want to kind of echo what Brigitte said in terms of the optimism, as well as the technology. But what we're finding is that Gen Z is either a polar extreme or a complete opposite of Gen Y, and I'll give you a couple examples of that. If you start out with technology, which I agree is the defining difference, an average millennial multitasks across 2 digital screens versus 5 for Gen Z. So you're really talking about a marked difference there. Generally, the research will describe millennials as tech savvy, whereas for Gen Z, you're really saying that they're tech innate. And although millennials were really the first generation to fully embrace social media, now we're dealing with a generation that doesn't distinguish between social platforms and the internet in general. So when they're going to research colleges, they go straight to the university's Facebook page. They're not going to the university's webpage. So that's really different. I would also say that Generation Z is hyper personalized. And one of the demands that the millennials made on us well over 10 years ago, which forced us to actually re-engineer our dining halls, is that they demanded food that was built to order. So, we went from a model where you got served what you got served in the food line to being able to go to multiple stations and actually have somebody, cook a burger to order, and then you got to build your own. So this is 10 years ago. Now those demands, if you can imagine, are so much more acute, to the extent that we actually allow our Gen Z guests to actually vote on what they want to eat. So they're actually now driving the menu through technology, and they want to be in everything. So as a marketer, if we don't provide opportunities for them to kind of be in the marketing, they're really not engaged. If you can imagine, with the rise of the selfie and all of the visual platforms, that really is another marked difference, with Gen Z really focused on imagery versus millennials really focused more on text, short bites, but text. We're in a place now where we're looking at designing spaces that are selfie friendly, which is really very interesting. And then finally, I would say that you are talking about a much more realistic generation, because now in many cases, they're living in multi-generational homes with siblings who are millennials, parents, Gen X parents, and then grandparents in the same household. They're watching the struggles of their millennial siblings, and they're kind of resolved to doing things differently. So they're while millennials do tend to be very optimistic, they're much more realistic, very hungry to work. we can't wait to get them into our facilities because they really, really want to work, and it's a very, it's a very interesting and exciting dynamic from this group. So I'll stop there so we can get to other questions and contribute some more.
It's interesting, though, you brought up the optimism and the realism, because I think also one of the things that distinguishes both of these generations is that they were born into a crisis, right? We're in this global crisis. It's in front of them day in, day out. And I've read that, millennials are really standing on the shoulders of Gen X and the boomers, but that the Gen Z are really here to clean up the mess. So, and you'd mentioned earlier, so in the reason, so this is not to go off the rails on some hippie rant, but it's this kind of notion of the expectation that your brand is going to stand for something from a corporate and social responsibility standpoint, sustainability. Talk a little bit about that, especially I think from the Williams-Sonoma standpoint when you're actually selling products that are being manufactured, and how your brand is making changes there and addressing these concerns, and also from the standpoint of how that works in the food service industry.
Yeah, I want to echo really quickly something that you said, Patti, about co-creation, about really being able to participate in your brand. We're opening up more channels to do that, and that is a clear marker generationally. But with regard to corporate social responsibility, we have had to up our game and really think seriously about what our commitments are as a brand in that area. We have a program that we are in the midst of rolling out, and I'll talk about it in a second, but we actually incubated a lot of the ideas in our West Elm brand, who really was immersed more in Gen Y and in Millennials before Pottery Barn was. But Pottery Barn, now that we are entering a phase where we are evolving our brand to better serve our current customers, where we have developed a fully integrated corporate social responsibility platform that we truly live. It does have to come from a genuine place, and it truly does. So a few years ago, we already had committed to supporting homeless shelters across the United States. We're up to 30 at this point, with micro grants across all of them. So there's a leg to the platform around supporting the communities where we do business, and also the communities where we manufacture. So we have programs to assist workers in country where we produce our products. And then there's another leg to it, which is about the materials we use and the resources that we use to produce our products.
And are you noticing any demand for some quantification for that from your shoppers? So you go back to this whole digital shopping experience. Are you integrating any data or information into that shopping experience?
Absolutely. So even down to the product information page, the page that you would shop from, making it transparent what the commitment is from that particular product. One of the interesting things that we're looking at for our PB Teen brand is aligning with an organization called Me to We. And there's a very interesting product, if you will, that they offer as a nonprofit. It's called Track Your Impact. So when you commit to Me to We, you can actually put a serial number on every single product you produce. And the consumer can track from that serial number where their money went, specifically down to the student in the school that the contribution went to. So, yeah.
Patti?
So, and again, I think, with Generation Z, the demands are even much more so. Just to kind of lead off with a statistic, our research shows that about 76% of the Gen Z generation wakes up every day concerned about man's impact on the planet. So they're very actively thinking about that. And so we're always having to tie what we do to a social cause. And if you can imagine, in food service, sustainability impacts just about everything that we do. So the demands for local sourcing of our ingredients are absolutely off the charts. If you can imagine, everything is recyclable. We tend to group our activities into 4 buckets: eat green, run green, return green, and eat green, run, return green, and build green. And so in everything that we do, from the facility that we construct to the food that we're creating with an emphasis on food products that are have an easy footprint, carbon footprint. Those are all things that we're really focused on. If you look at our engagement socially, anytime that we run a social media campaign that's tied to a social cause that they care about, it is a top performer for us, well over anything. And so this is really critical. And to Mary's point, in kind of looking at the origin for this line of thinking, really feel strongly that it is because they're being born into a climate now where there is so much concern about impact on the planet, so much uncertainty in the world in general, just from a safety standpoint, and so they are kind of committing to do good. And then I'll just kind of finish up with one more statistic on that. About 60% of them have already decided that they're going to take a job that has something to do with making a positive impact on the world versus 39% for millennials.
How do you identify the social causes that your particular audience is interested in?
This is where we really have to listen because it definitely varies by market. And some of it is quite honestly trial and error where there's not something obvious. We'll run a breast cancer awareness campaign and see what the response is. And we were actually quite surprised because you would think that this demographic would not be as tight into that. To find out that actually is very top of mind. So you start asking questions, well, is this because they have family members who have experienced that kind of illness? Oftentimes, we're on college campuses, so college campuses care about social causes. So oftentimes, our clients, at the institution have a particular social cause. But for the most part, we don't attach to anyone in particular. We really try to monitor the marketplace, and we listen to what students have to say, and often they're very vocal, so it's not too difficult.
And Brigitte, would you say the same is true for your type of industry, or is it more tied to the types of things you manufacture and the trends in that industry?
Yeah, it is more who are we at our best. So what does our company do? What's our mission? Our mission is to enhance the lives of our customers at home. And so it's about enhancing the lives of our customers and giving them the dignity of home. So it's what can our company do to make the world better? And that's where we focus our efforts. Yeah.
Any questions so far on this line of questioning? Feel free, by the way, at any point in time to wave your hand, and if you have anything that, oh, there's one.
So there are markers that we work with that would say focusing heavily on the millennials at this time is not a good use of dollars. That the generation that they're focusing on now, they have all the money and millennials don't. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, just curious as to your opinion, particularly with a more upscale brand like Pottery Barn.
Yeah, great question. I sit in meetings with our CEO regularly and talking about that. So yes, you're absolutely right that the spending power hasn't taken over from the other generations at this point. But looking down the road and staying relevant is key, right? And it takes a while, especially for a company of our size, to evolve. And if we're not thinking about it now, then we're not going to be caught up in the time when it becomes the right time, when the spending power is there. We see the home sector already moving toward millennial. We see a lot of the momentum going toward the millennial consumer. So for us, it's about, especially being a long lead business, a business that it takes about a year for us to produce product. So by the time that we get to the point where we're ready to, to serve those customers, it's going to be a while. But I also want to point out, just even from a company environment, that as of the first quarter of this year, the millennial generation is the majority in the workforce. So it's not just our customer, it's our colleagues. So I think we need to think critically on a few different levels.
And I had a data point that said that $600 billion of indirect spending is influenced by millennials. Is that due to and is that the right number? I read that in some research report, but it's a big number, I'm sure, whatever it is. But is that due to the multi-generational households, or that because they kind of are perceived to know so much more because they have so much more access to information that their families tend to listen to them more? Is that a number that's important today as you're thinking about marketing?
It's important for us because we have stats that show that there's tremendous influence over the menu in the household. So, just looking at our business, and millennials are foodies, and Gen Z even more so. So they're actually actively influencing what their moms are buying for the week. So plus as I mentioned earlier, we think that the spending power probably will be there for this group because they are kind of ready to go to work so much harder. So that was just something I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, my kids create the shopping list in the household. So anybody have any questions so far on this? I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit to channels because there were some differences in social media channels used by the two different generations, and I'd like to understand a little bit more about that. So maybe, Brigitte, you can...
Well, I think that what's interesting to me is we talk a lot about being a more visual generation, Gen Z in particular, but millennials as well. And what's nice for us as a brand in Pottery Barn is that we've always been very visually oriented, photos, photography, showing our product visually has always been more of a priority, honestly, than the copy and some of the other pieces. So that's worked to our advantage. We are integrating more video, and we're just being more short format in our communication. And I just honestly don't think it's not just for the millennial generation. It's for anyone who's consuming media in those channels. So that's been a big shift for us, but one that we were easily able to adapt to.
And on the point that that Patti made about social media and people starting on the Facebook page of their colleges, do you find that that's changed the way that you lead as well and push people into an online shopping experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not thinking about it as much as a funnel. The customer journey is quite loopy. It's all over the place, exactly. So it's being relevant in the channels where we are and knowing that the customer can discover us and discover a new product in any one of those pieces of exposure. So we think about it more along those lines and less of the linear, first they get this, then they do this type of a approach.
Well, it's been very interesting going from traditional integrated marketing communications strategy to integrated digital platform strategy, really. And I'd be lying if I said that we had it all figured out. But we're really looking at a generation that is responding only to the digital channels. Now, in reality, we still have to market to parents and we still have to market to faculty. So we can't ignore some of the traditional channels. But we're still dealing with a group that only puts their devices down to eat. So that means that the demands on us to integrate across channels have become greater. And so that's really something that we're grasping with right now. How do we integrate from Facebook to Snapchat? How do we do that? So that's something that's keeping us very busy right now.
We're thinking a lot about the digital channels, and we're working a lot in that area, but what is interesting to us is still the desire to be in a retail store and to see and touch and feel the product, so that is still a piece of the puzzle for us.
How do you integrate the digital and the retail?
Yeah, that is probably our biggest challenge. We've done so much great work online, we've done so much great work in the digital space and in our social channels, I think, and it's about bringing that more into the retail space and making those two pieces work more seamlessly together and make it easier for the customer to shop across. That I don't have the answer to that yet. We're working
More
on it.
selfies, more places to take selfies.
Yeah.
Patti, any thoughts on how you kind of integrate that live experience? And you'd mentioned earlier that sort of the backgrounds for selfies and.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things going on for us. The implication of that. I mean, it's just enormous when you're really watching the behavior, and you're watching someone literally take pictures of everything. I mean, they're taking pictures of everything that they eat. They're taking pictures of themselves, in our venues all over the place, and you're forced to think about that. You're forced to think about how you redesign the restaurant experience so that the background looks good. In photography, photogenic walls, if you will. And then also, really having to change your tone a little bit to be more quirky and playful, because that's really, that's kind of really the ticket to engagement is for us to be a little less serious and more of a friend and less of a business. And so, that's part is the marketing, part of that is the facility. And then really the other piece of that too is the transparency piece, and using those digital channels to communicate vital information about the product that we're providing in the facility. So that means that we've got nutritional information about our food everywhere that we can possibly think of putting it. From right next to, from a computer-generated product identification label to the digital menu boards, to the smartphone app, to the to the desktop, to the tablet that's actually inside the dining facility or in the student's hand. And that's vital because although we're not actively marketing, it's a more preferred way for the guest to engage, for this aged guest to engage with us. They would rather make decisions about their food and feel good about where it's coming from and the impact on the environment through the information that we're giving them, so that they're making their own decisions. We're not actually telling them. So that's also been something that's been a very deliberate shift to respond to this demographic.
We've definitely shifted that tone as well in terms of it used to be sort of, we have a style. We're going to tell you what's trending. We have this point of view, and it's shifting. We are definitely shifting toward, how can we help you express your style? What can these products work in your life? It ends up for us being a more eclectic way of presenting our brand, presenting product, and then also allowing more of our customers to show us how they style it in their homes. So it's a shift in the point of view and a more welcoming tone.
That's a really nice segue to the next question I was going to ask, which is, we've done a lot of generalizing, but, how important is it to understand the whole segment versus understanding the individual customer and how to respond to them?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. For us, it's about thinking about the life stage of that particular customer. We actually call them our people instead of customer, consumer, millennial, et cetera. So what are our people doing when they're getting married? And we think a lot about that. And what are they doing today, getting married today? And so we like to talk to our customers, one-on-one, in focus groups, dipping into the social listening piece. So really taking a lot of the different pieces on as individual level as we can. And I talked a little bit earlier about like small data. We definitely look at big data. We're definitely reacting on that level. But we're also looking at these little pieces as signs and helping us get.
And it sounds like you're also creating ways for them to create their own, kind of express their own style and tell you what they're interested in their own. Do you do things like that in the digital environment, like allowing them to put rooms together?
Just last week, we launched hashtag #MyPotteryBarn on our site. So we integrated user-generated content into our site. So if you go to potterybarn.com/mypotterybarn, you'll see our gallery of all of our amazing customers' homes. And on the product information pages, every page of product will show our styled product, the produced imagery from our brand, but in addition, a whole stream of that same product shown in all of our customers' homes. And it's been huge. I mean,
so that's your customers inspiring other customers.
Absolutely. And inspiring us. too.
And for us, I would say, I mean, we have to start with the generalizations. We only have our audience for 4 years, and they're in one life stage. So that makes, in many ways, that makes things more simple for us. But it does not take the place of good old-fashioned targeting when we're trying to show an ROI. And I can give you an example of that. Something that I love to talk about because it's just so simple and logical. That we often use Facebook targeting, very, very simple, to help drive incremental traffic to our restaurants. And in one situation, we had just built out a Starbucks on a campus that was out of the typical traffic pattern by doing a 2-day ad buy on Facebook that just targeted guests who were 18 years of age and older, liked coffee-related pages, lived within 25 miles of the college campus, like pages related to the college campus, and liked pages from the other national food brands that we had on campus. We were able to generate an incremental 16% same-store lift at that Starbucks, which was sizable. We've maintained that for 2 years. We've maintained 86% of that for 2 years. And that ad buy cost us about $90. Just by using good logical targeting and pairing it with the then social platform of choice.
You also mentioned earlier about targeting different socio demographics. So showing food the way, because we have such a diverse culture now, showing ethnic food the way somebody expects it to look.
Another way that we've really had to adjust to deliver the right experience for this generational shift is that we're really looking at a group that went from being diversity tolerant in the millennial generation to being diverse across the board in the Gen Z generation. So their expectations of our food are much more about giving them the type of cuisine that they're used to growing up with, regardless of what their backgrounds are, and making it authentic. So 10 years ago, we had to put Chinese food on the menu because the palates, were very, found that type of cuisine appealing. And now it's because we have sizable populations of students from that background who demand authentic Chinese cuisine, not just a Chinese food brand in the operation, just by example. So it's really forced us to be much more authentic and diverse, not just in our marketing, but also in our product delivery.
And that speaks to the variety that your brand has to produce. And I would think the same must be true for Williams-Sonoma, given this, it's the self-expressionist time as well, right? So not everybody wants the same thing.
Absolutely. We have definitely expanded our aesthetics over the last several years, and we'll be doing even greater expansion into other types of aesthetics to really provide customers the opportunity to create the look that they want. The question that we grapple with is actually how far do we go before we lose who we are? So that's sort of the thing that we think about a lot as well.
And what are those guardrails at this point? And do those evolve? Are they evolving?
The guardrails are definitely evolving, but they are still there. So for us, we have a more traditional aesthetic. It's a classic traditional design aesthetic, and we're evolving more into, in the design world, it's called transitional. So some elements of modern, but not quite where West Elm is, for example, in the mid-century modern and more modern aesthetics, but integrating more pieces that are transitional. Yes. Sorry. Here. Yeah. Noticed a hand go up.
Thank you. I'm just noticing, I don't want the time to go past without asking this. First of all, this is the most interesting conversation I've heard the whole time. So I loved everything the whole week, but the whole day. But this is really, really great. So thank you all three so much. I'm wondering, when you think about these targets, are there books that you've read. I mean, not all of us have the luxury. I envy your ability to sit and sort of watch it all unfold every day. But are there articles, are there books, and even things like, if you want to see a movie that really nails it, or you want to immerse yourself in a day and spend your day doing Gen Z kinds of things and really kind of feel what it's like. All of those things. What would you suggest if you want to sort of immerse yourself for 2 days in the world of Gen Z and millennials?
I have some great suggestions. I'm sure you do too. If you want some great, really, I think the best industry data on millennial mom, it comes from Baby Center. Interestingly, they have over 90% of moms in their universe, in the United States at least. So they have a thing called babycentersolutions.com, which is where all of their research is housed, and some of their most recent data is amazing. Very, very helpful for anyone who thinks about moms today. Barclay, an agency out there, put out a really great report called Millennial Parents, or the New Millennial Parent. I would definitely download that. It's a great way to look at millennial parents in 5 segments. Very diverse group of people, and kind of really thinking about it in a different way, depending on who your market is. For Gen Z, I think that there's a lot of great stuff out there. My trick when I want to know more about it is I'll Google Gen Z and go to the images results, and then find all the great research work that's out there, and download that. Those are some of my go-tos.
And I will tell you that I go first to YouTube. That's exactly that's where they go, and so that's where I go. But there is a piece, it's very easy to find. You can actually go to slideshare.net and just type in Generation Z and get that. And it's a nice summary. It's a deck done by an agency based out of New York called Sparks and Honey.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
And it's just a great summary deck. It'll get you started. And then, like I said, I go to YouTube.
And there's an author out there, Dave Burstein, who just is continuously following, and you can follow him on Twitter, and there's all sorts of new things. And he started on millennials and has just expanded to the Gen Z, but he's always got some interesting blog posts and social commentary on the two things.
And along those lines, actually, I would definitely subscribe to Y Pulse Daily. That's one of my favorite sources for just quick, great data on millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah, and one of the things we were talking about earlier, and I think we talked about this kind of earlier in the day around, understanding the kind of the forces in the world that are driving the psychology of these different generations as well. And we had talking about this just a little bit, but maybe each of you could just share some thoughts on, what has happened in the world that is really kind of driving these different segments, and ways that you draw those correlations even today about how they might respond to some of the things that are going on, in the news right now.
Well, I mentioned the technology piece, but it's just made everything we do so much more transparent. And you as a brand really have to come to terms with who you are and what kind of service you truly provide, what kind of value you truly provide to customers today. So in a way, it makes it harder for a lot of brands, but in a lot of ways, I think it makes things a lot simpler. You really have to know, you have to have a great product. You have to deliver it really well. You have to really understand your customer. It really gets down to some very fundamental things, and I find it actually refreshing. I find it like if you are true to your brand and you really serve a need for your customer and understand what their needs and problems are and how you can help them, then you'll always have the right answer. So in a way, I think it's the technology that's enabled all of us to find out more about the products that we buy. So that's the piece that's changed everything.
And I would say, in addition to technology, our research shows that there's really 2 drivers of the psyche of Gen Z. One is the Great Recession, and watching one parent or both parents lose jobs, and kind of the more somber outlook economically, which we haven't really talked about, but we could probably talk for another 45 minutes about about the value expectation that ensues from that, and that fear. And then the second thing, oddly enough, is school violence. So if you think about the number of school shootings and how it might feel to actually be in school, when there is a big school shooting that occurs. The research shows that that has actually left a much stronger impression on kids growing up than a lot of other things like terrorism that I think also kind of plays, 9/11 also plays into it. But because it is, it's a fear that is kind of daily on the ground with them, that's something that is also driving a lot of kind of the fear and the hunger that they have and the realism.
I would say another point that you made earlier was the diversity piece as well.
Definitely.
Driving change.
And price sensitivity, that's something that we haven't really addressed. Maybe you could just speak to that for your brand.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We are working so hard in that area, making our brand more accessible to folks that are more price sensitive or just aware of what value really is.
Yeah, for us, it's more value. There's as you can imagine. I mean, our core revenue, even though retail is growing much faster than you can imagine, our traditional revenue base is the meal plan. And so as meal plan costs rise, we field a lot more questions about why, about the why behind that. And there's a much greater challenge to deliver and to demonstrate and talk about in a proactive way the value that you're getting from a meal plan. So that's been one of the impacts on us from that perspective.
And what do you do in your space to even sort of dimensionalize what they're getting for value? Like, is there content that you provide when they're selecting the food for, that helps to dimensionalize or change the conversation around value at all?
I mean, we engage in some of the traditional marketing, approaches, combo meals, things like that, bundles. But what ultimately speaks louder, because of the business that we're in, is variety. And so to the extent that we could put more variety on the menu, the perception is that the value goes up. And it's interesting because the variety doesn't need to be high-cost variety. You don't always need to add steak to the menu to drive that perception. Sometimes it's adding a grain just to round out the kind of the portfolio. And so that's really been, I think, one of the most important things. When we survey, there's always first, front and center, value is the absolute number one driver of satisfaction. And menu variety follows at a very close 2 or 3. And so they're really tied very closely together. It's not just about the marketing.
For us, it's producing more entry-level price point product, putting that product up in front in the marketing vehicles, and then adding more benefits to the shopping experience, great service, and other aspects that add value.
Any more questions? So any other thoughts that either of you would like to share before we wrap up the day?
I'll take a start. I just, it's been a really interesting journey for me as a marketer to learn so much about both groups and to see both groups in action. And so one of my hopes is that what you would take away is the next time somebody refers to a Gen Zer as a millennial, perhaps you can tactfully correct them because they really are not one and the same. So that's a thought that I would leave you with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also encourage everybody to really, know your brand, know what purpose you serve for your consumer. It's a real fundamental, but it's a very important thing to get clarity on, and then think about your consumers beyond the generation and into the life stage that you're serving.
All right. If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today, and thank you, Brigitte and Patti. I learned a lot and really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.